This intro.
Good morning and welcome to Meet Magento Indonesia.
We're looking forward to doing this again next year. In the
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Business Room 1 for the morning session. I'll call it the power breakfast session here because we have a series of 3 great speakers that are going to start our day in the Meet Magento today. And we've for the first speakers is a good friend of mine. He is a chief commerce evangelist for Magento. He loves to do marathon. And they also have a very great podcast that I think you guys should follow. It's called Talk Commerce. So after the show, make sure that you Google out that, and I can even you can message me. I can give you the link, and Brent also can share the link later. All right, and he has a very interesting topic this morning that he's going to share with us called the infinite loop of customer experience. So without further ado, please welcome Brent Peterson.
Great, thanks a lot. I appreciate that. I'm excited to be here, my second year in a row for a virtual event. And yeah, just very excited to be here again. And yeah, so my topic tonight is the infinite loop of the customer experience. And I think one thing that has been consistent or has been a problem or hasn't been a problem has been how the customer goes through a project, how they experience the project, whether it's Magento or any other system, and how they embrace the project with both the teams from an agency side and from the customer side. So I'm going to show that a project starts and it finishes, but really the ideal situation for anybody, the customer, the agency, the developer, is that we're going through this infinite loop of extreme customer experience, of good customer experience, and that we're enjoying it. So my name is Brent Peterson. I'm a Magento master. I'm an Adobe insider, Magento solution specialist. I'm a Meet Magento organizer. I'm excited that we've put on Meet Magento in Mexico. We've put it on in India. I'm an Adobe subject matter expert, which I'm not really sure what that means. I guess I know something about something. And I'm just going to say that I tell jokes, but I don't do it very well. And I'm going to do my best not to say any jokes tonight because they never go across, and I can't see anybody laughing on the other end. So I don't know if it matters anyways. But certainly I do try to tell a pun or two of the jokes. So one of my passions, I do run marathons. I do run all over the world in all types of temperatures. And it is what I like to do when I travel. I also take selfies while running, and I've had many people unfollow me because of that very reason. So I encourage you to follow me at Brent W. Peterson and not unfollow me if you happen to see a selfie in my stream. So today, again, we're going to talk about extreme customer experience, and really, who is this for? This is for anybody that wants to improve their experience in a project or a build or any type of interaction that you're having in a software environment. It's for developers, how the developers communicate with their merchant, how they communicate with their team. It's for an agency. It's for a merchant. Everybody has a responsibility in the project. but really everybody wants to be engaged in the project, and they want to listen, they want to learn, and they want to have fun in the project. So projects, going way back, projects, software projects can be messy. There's this statistic that I found on ZDNet that 68% of the projects fail, which is a scary number. They're hazardous. Most of the time they go over budget. They're long, it can be long hours on anybody. There's risks that are not known and therefore unmanaged. Oftentimes, there's a breakdown in communication. Sometimes the project goes on autopilot. Sometimes the stakeholders don't engage enough in the project. There's all kinds of reasons why projects fail. I'm going to go through a few things in my presentation today to help make projects successful, and I'll point out times in which we can be better as developers, as merchants, as agency heads, as project managers to make a successful project. So to start out, I think what we really want to do is don't make things too complicated. You want to get some assumptions from the client. You want to make sure that those assumptions are the same type of assumptions that you have as an agency. Or if you're the merchant, make sure that you are communicating with your agency to understand what they're going to give you. And really, the best way to go about this is to level out whatever expectation you have. If somebody says, hey, I'm going to deliver this thing, get it in writing. From the agency side, we want to do some discovery. Some of that is just getting to know your client better. Some of it is getting to know the project better, getting to know the customer's code. Then I'm going to just go into a little bit about writing out reports, making sure that everything that's being communicated is in writing, and then communicating often. And so when I say reporting, it's not always written reports, it is also verbal. And I think a great example is if a client isn't always reading their reports, maybe go over the report with them live in person or on a Zoom call to make sure that they at least understand what's happening in that. And then for the infinite part, we're going to do this infinitely. So we're going to rinse and repeat. I know that I can't say rinse and repeat because I don't have a lot of hair, but some people have hair and they rinse and repeat. All right, so let's start with the journey. I want to start this journey even before we enter into a project, because in the beginning, there's a salesperson, and that salesperson somehow contacts a client, or the client talks to a salesperson, and they make first contact. The salesperson then starts to develop the relationship with the client. And I think one mistake that a lot of agencies make is that the salesperson then just drops it off and they leave. So this first contact, number one, it's making this first impression. It's making the client aware of the company they're working in. But then later on, as we're going to see, we want to make sure that that salesperson is at least involved in the project to help ensure that some of the things that they're promising are going to get delivered. And if you think about it from the other side, the client may sometimes interpret what a salesperson is saying in a different way after the project starts. So we have building a relationship then. The salesperson is going to build this relationship. They're going to help the client move. They're going to help them feel comfortable. And if you've been in a software project, there's a period called a honeymoon in which everything's going great. It's always going great when you're talking to the salesperson, because everything is possible when you talk to a salesperson. So when it doesn't go great is when you find out that something is a little bit different than the salesperson said, or whatever reason. But the goal, the bottom line here is that this salesperson is building a relationship with the client, and they're going to start telling the client that something is going to get delivered. The problem here is that the developer, the project manager, the customer service people, they don't know what exactly is being promised. So we're going to figure out how we're going to connect some of those dots. The salesperson, in a worst case, is just going to leave this and then let the client walk into this black hole of the abyss, into the unknown. And I say here, it's important that we don't just dump this person on the PM team. The salesperson needs to be there. They need to be there for at least the first couple of meetings. They need to make sure that everything that is communicated, everything that was proposed, and if you think about a proposal, is something that is sold to the client. They need to make sure that that proposal is made into a statement of work that everybody agrees on, even after the deal has been signed, everything has been closed. The salesperson can't just walk away at that point. Our next step in the journey is going to be project management. We've just talked about how the salesperson has walked out or has helped us in a perfect world here. Now we have a project manager. They're going to take over this project. The project manager is now going to own this relationship. They're going to be the customer's advocate. They're going to work to make sure that this project gets done on time. And they are going to work with the client to make sure it's successful. This is where, when we first start these conversations, that the salespeople still have to be involved to make sure that any expectations that the client has are being met. Anything that the salesperson has said that isn't necessarily in writing is going to come out. And we want to make sure that both parties understand what's going to be delivered. When you're the project manager now, we want to make sure that everything is simple enough for everybody to understand. We want to, as a project manager, you want to make sure that you're demonstrating a strong commitment to starting and finishing the project, which is going to build confidence with their client. And at this point as well, we want to include a customer service person. So the customer service person is another touch point that the client can rely on to make sure that they have a voice that is heard across the entire scope of this project. And the customer service person, as we're going to see later on, is going to be the glue that helps us to keep this whole project, this whole infinite customer loop together, to make sure that everything goes smooth and nothing gets left behind. So I think a lot of issues come from expectations in a project and how the client sees those expectations, or even as a project manager, what you're expecting the client to know or do or want or see. So how do we align some of those things? If we help educate the client up front on the entire process, and this goes all the way back to when we had the salesperson involved, the salesperson should be helping educate the client on how a project is going to look. Let's just say, for example, the project should last 6 months. Well, we want to have a 3-month check-in to make sure we're on track and on target for making this project work. All this education is going to happen up front. It's going to happen during the onboarding. It's going to help everybody remain in the same space to understand what's going to happen. The next thing is, from the client side, it is extremely important that the client also participates in the project to make sure that that they are getting back to the agency what is needed. And then I have on here that ultimately it is the agency's job to ensure that everybody's expectations are being met. As hard as that sounds, it is still up to the agency to make sure that everybody's expectations are met. And that can be done simply through a daily report, a daily update, a repeated visual that gives the client a good expectation of what is to come, what's going to happen, what's going to be next on this project scope. And how do we do that? We're going to use communication. We're going to use a lot of communication. I'm a big fan of extreme communication. We want to be very precise and careful in our explanations of the project process. We want to communicate all timelines. We want to make sure that everything is spelled out correctly. So for example, it's 1,000 hours. We want to make sure that that project, the total number of hours is on the top of that report, and how many hours are left is on the top of the report. So everybody can see if we're going over budget, we're gonna see that, hey, we're only a month into this, we've already used up 80% of our hours. We would all see that up front. We can start those conversations now, and we can move and shift things sooner than if we were not to communicate all these things. If there's a delay, we want to make sure that that delay is explained. We want to make sure that everything that's happening in that portion of that is being explained, and there's an accountability to each of those items. Some of these delays could be on the project, on the agency side, the developer side. A lot of times delays are also on the client side. So if it is a simple binary item that's there, i.e. if there's a developer, if there's not enough resources to complete the task, or if the client doesn't give the information that is needed, then those are going to be very evident on what is happening and why that delay is happening. And then finally, I have here balance the information that the client is going to get. The client doesn't need a whole list of JIRA tickets week after week. What the client needs, what the project manager needs to do, and what especially the stakeholder or the CEO of the company needs is a summary of what's happened. And the best way you could do that is just to write out, how did the week go? You're going to verbally say that to the client anyways. So if there is a narrative of what happened in that, let's just say sprint, that is a great way to communicate some of those points to everybody to make sure that everything's on the same page. The opposite of that is giving them way too much information. They stop looking at everything. They don't understand why there's so much detail and what is it, trying to figure out what means what within that detail. Balancing that information and giving that client what they need is the most important part of this communication tool. So we all know that projects are going, and we all know that sometimes people change their mind. If it's the longer the project, the more changes are going to happen. We want to make sure that during this process that we are reviewing what's happening, and we're bringing up those changes as soon as those changes happen, and we put that in writing. The more we can talk about changes that are happening in a project, the more we can bring to attention that this change has happened, and then we just document and discuss it, the less likely anybody is going to be upset at the end of some period. So worst case is you wait at the end, you wait for 3 months, and then you communicate, oh, by the way, there was 1,000 hours and changes. Everybody's going to be a little bit bent out of shape, especially the client. If you were to bring up the change when it happens, let's just say on a weekly basis, you document everything, you put it in writing, you say, hey, this is where the changes are happening. This is how it impacts the timeline. Here's what we're going to have to remove to make these changes happen to meet your goal of launching this product in this time that we have to do. Those are the type of conversations around change and change management that can make the project successful or unsuccessful. During that part, you also want to discuss your budget. You want to make sure that whatever is proposed is still going to meet the needs of the budget, and that is going to be in scope. And then finally, there are going to be things that if they are not in budget or not in the time that is allowed, that you can push to post-launch. There's going to be a minimum viable product that you will be able to use for your project that will allow you to launch live. And then some of those things that either came up, or maybe there's something that wasn't important that was replaced by something more important, but you wanted to stay on time. Those things can get pushed to later. So reporting is how we're going to make all this happen. I'm a firm believer in weekly reporting. If you want to report simply as you're on your sprints, it's another great way to do it. One of the most important things is going to be saying how much time is left. How much time do we have left on our budget? And what I mean is not just time left, like we have 2 or 3 months, but also how many hours have we allocated to this and how many hours have we used? If we show that on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis, then there's going to be a better opportunity to bring up conversations of why we're going through so many hours so quickly, or why aren't we going through so many hours so quickly? If we are getting to the point of nearly launching, or we are at the point of missing things, then I'm a believer in a daily status update that would be given to the stakeholders in the project. And those would have key metrics to help everybody understand where we're at right now, and to get us either launched, or if the project is in jeopardy, corrected. And just on top of that, we want to make sure that we're documenting each of these things. We're documenting any delays. And then from the agency side, I put here that the agency needs to listen to the client. They need to listen to what the client would like to achieve during this process. And then there has to be a negotiation. If it's something that's being asked for that is not possible, that has to be brought up, and that has to be put out there as this can't be done. So I did mention at the very beginning that there's going to be this person that glues everything together. They're called the customer service manager, or some people call them a customer success manager. This person is often not used during the project process. So just like the salesperson leaves, the project goes, the project launches, and now we get the customer service person. I'm advocating for all these people to be in the project all at once to make sure that the project goes smoothly. And most importantly, everybody understands the relationships in that project, and they can make sure that everything is going correctly. Don't wait until the project is launched. The customer service person should be there to do frequent check-ins with the client, to listen to the client if there's anything that's happening that maybe they don't feel comfortable with telling the project manager. They can get NPS scores during the project build. They'll be that glue that helps that communication go. And then, as I mentioned earlier, doing quarterly check-ins and strategy meetings with the client to have an opportunity to either reset the project or correct anything that needs to be done to meet the goal of the client and how the project is going to go forward. After we finish the project, it's going to start all over again. And in this case, if there's something new, the salesperson comes back in, the project manager is there, and the customer services person is still there, still helping, still working. This is where the infinite loop comes in. So just some key takeaways today. The more communication, the better. Understanding what's happening and not assuming. We always want to put everything into writing to make sure that it is clear on what is being expected. We want to talk about changes, and we want to talk about those changes as soon as we can. The sooner the better. We want to be honest and upfront about what's happening in this project. And then we want to start awkward conversations. We don't want to not bring up something that is uncomfortable, because I can guarantee you it's going to be more uncomfortable in 3 months than it is going to be now. And that's it. I have 5 minutes for Q&A.
All right, and let's just wait for anybody on the audience sending a Q&A right now.
What they see in the
well,
chat window?
Actually, I'm watching on the other side of the
Okay.
below. Just make sure that people chatting there, if there's any question on there. But while waiting, Brent, why don't you tell us a little bit about your podcast? Like what do you cover there, and how long have you been starting that podcast?
I started this, I guess, this spring. It hasn't been that long, but it's been very successful and it's been fun. So I cover anything that is e-commerce related, and I'm being very platform agnostic, meaning that I'm not just doing Magento. I'm not just doing any platform. I'm trying to cover all platforms. So I've been talking to OroCommerce. I'm talking to Yoav Kutner on Friday about OroCommerce, but I talked to Ben Marks about Shopware, talking to people about BigCommerce, Shopify. Trying to get a good idea in general about e-commerce and commerce in general. And I've most recently started a little series on AWS, Amazon Web Services, and even how content is presented and how that content is related to e-commerce content. So
right.
I've been.
Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead. You've been interviewing. You said.
Yeah, so I've been interviewing some content creators from TV stations, because they have tremendous spikes in traffic, way more than we can imagine as e-commerce vendors. They have, and they also don't always know when it's going to happen. So it's been an interesting journey. Yes.
Okay, we have one question here from the audience. He asked, how do you serve the client's immediate expectation at the end? I guess this is referring to the customer that really just want it now. Everything's like, how do you align that expectation of the client? I guess at that part.
Yeah, that's a great question, because there's so many different cultures, and we're in Mexico, we're in US, where every client is different, and a lot of clients expect things right now. So I think that having that conversation about what's realistic when we can deliver it, and then making sure that everybody slows down a little bit so we can do some of that planning, and understanding that planning is work, and that planning is development, and that we're still working on that and we're moving forward, and then finding something we can deliver on every sprint so the client sees something that we're doing. I think in the Magento world, a great example is, we can show them the back end of Magento. We can put their products in it, and we can show them in the Luma theme. Right? You can usually do that in a couple of weeks. So that's
exactly
right there. It shows some success on a new build.
It is. Okay, I think we have one more question that I can cover here. He from Rio Rubiaggio saying, how do you prevent a delay of a project?
How do you prevent it? You can't prevent a delay.
You cannot.
But you can, no. But I think what I said earlier about making sure that if you're putting something new in, you need to take something out. If you want to make sure you're going to hit your target, you can't keep shoving things into the pipeline and expecting it still to come out the same way. Having a minimum viable product at the very beginning and everybody agreeing on it is the best way to launch a project on time.
Yeah. And I agree with you what you said. I think also the important key is the honest conversation, right? I think that's really kind of make it different. If we have that honest conversation between us and the client, it is also apply in the retail world when you have just a retail merchant and their customers. I think the genuinity, that's what the customer looking for, and that's usually even though there's a delay, both party will know it's not like a surprise at the end. Basically, I think that's really the key.
Yeah, tell it how it is.
It is, exactly. All right, I guess
Exactly.
I think we have to wrap up for the next speaker. Thank you so much, Brent. I mean, for your time and
Yes.
this. I hope to see you soon. Maybe next year when we have a physical event, you can come down here to Jakarta.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it.
All right. Take care. I'll see you, Brent.
Bye.
Ah!